Hey everybody, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And what's great for your mental health is getting outside and working on those springtime projects.
And our boys over at the Hobby Tractor Store, Lance and Scott Sage, are here to help you no matter how big or how small those yard projects are, putting in the new yard, helping your neighbor, whatever the need is. These guys have a tractor, they have a lawnmower, they have lawn aerators, they have everything you need to get that yard cleaned up for the springtime. They also sell tough sheds custom built to what you need, so you can store that new tractor or that new lawnmower inside and keep it nice when you're not using it. So go over and see our boys over at the Hobby Tractor Store and let them know that Scott and Hillary from Surviving Life's Pickles sent you.
This episode is brought to you from the Sensei Pickle Jar Studios, where they teach you how to use all that money you have saved in your pickle jar over the years towards your financial goals created through the Sensei Financial Roadmap tool. Click on the link in the podcast description to learn more.
Welcome back, everybody, to the next episode of Surviving Life's Pickles. I'm Scott Martin.
And I'm Hillary, and we're so excited to be here today.
Yeah, everybody, it's a beautiful spring morning in Utah today. Lincoln, we should be out riding our bikes today instead of sitting here, huh?
I agree. Maybe. Yeah.
So everybody, I've got Lincoln Bradshaw here today. He is a therapist with Koru Wellness. And what is the other practice you work at as well, Lincoln?
Well, actually, I haven't told you this, but I'm opening my own practice.
Okay.
Oh,
So
awesome.
just right now, it's just called Lincoln Bradshaw Counseling.
I love it. I love it. So we're going to put it out to the world today and fill your schedule, right?
If anybody's interested.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we start off every episode, we always jump into gratitude and kind of what's on our minds today. And Lincoln, I'm going to throw it to you. And what are you grateful for today? What's on your mind?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned sunshine. And so I'm going to stick with that. It's been kind of, we're in the beginning of April, and we're always just getting punked whether it's going to be a sunny day or snowy or rainy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just soak in those sunny days. So I'm stoked.
Yeah,
Stoked
super
today.
happy to see that sunshine out today.
Yeah.
Hill, what about you?
Today I'm grateful for therapy, and it's not just because you're here, Lincoln, but I've been diving into my own therapy lately, and it's really been so helpful. I took a break from therapy for a handful of years, and I just almost forgot how amazing it is to sit down and talk out things with another person. It definitely helps me control my crazies a little bit, is what I call them, but I'm so grateful for them. And for Emily, who's my therapist as well, and just the things that she's helped me with lately. How about you, Scott?
I'm going to run right there. I'm so thankful for therapy as well, but for a different reason. I'm thankful it has been able to teach me these skills over even the last couple of weeks that I've been able to share with other people and kind of introduce them to new things that they didn't know about, because there's so many different therapy modalities out there, and there's not one that's specific and perfect for every person. Every person has the one that works for them. There's just not one just blanket that, hey, this is therapy and it works for everybody. And so be able to talk about these different modalities and different things with people and share my experiences with a few of them has been very heartwarming. I mean, just warms my heart to be able to see how these guys see that there's hope and see that they don't have to stop with one therapist if they don't kind of get along with them. There's other options out there. And so that's been really, really good for me.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, well, everybody, today we've got Lincoln here in studio with us. And again, he is a therapist. I have participated in a few ketamine sessions with Lincoln, and that's kind of how we met. And it's been a wonderful experience. And just because of those experiences I was able to have with him, I wanted to bring him in and kind of share his story and kind of what he does with everybody, because it's super powerful. And so I'll kind of turn it over to Lincoln for a minute. And Lincoln, give us a little history. What inspired you to become a therapist, first of all? And what are the things that you kind of enjoy about it?
Yeah. You kind of asked me that before we started recording. And I think I told you like, ooh, I could go off for a couple hours telling you about why I became a therapist. So I'll try and keep it short. But I guess, or I'll try and keep it medium. I think, the therapy modality that I practice is called internal family systems therapy, or IFS. And we'll dive into that some more. But it's basically the idea that we're made up of parts. And I think part of me growing up really liked getting deep with people. I just really liked going to people, asking them deep questions, and getting them to open up. After kind of digging through this and kind of doing my own internal work, I kind of realized like, oh, the reason that I really like doing that is because I wanted people to reciprocate.
Uh-huh.
I wanted people to kind of ask me those questions to get the things that were kind of down deep within me to kind of come out. But I wanted people to just really yank it out of me. I didn't want to
give it up easy.
Yeah, volunteer that information.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so I think that's kind of what originally drove me, is this protector part of me really enjoyed just getting deep with people. And so I did my undergrad in psychology, and then I lost my way for a little while, and I did tech sales for 10 years.
Oh no.
Well, that'll take anybody to change their ways, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so I realized that it just wasn't for me. It was, I felt like there was something, a higher purpose for me. So I went to school while I was working, and I got my master's in social work. And now I feel like I'm doing what I need to be doing, what feels true to me.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just actually finally got your license just recently.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. So
Officially.
I am a licensed clinical social worker now. Yep.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
And as we kind of talk a little bit more, I mean, one thing anytime I've ever talked about you to anybody, I've always talked about you as my inside out therapist.
Mm.
And we'll dive into that, because Inside Out, really, Disney took such a great concept of internal family systems and turned it into a wonderful movie that kind of allowed people to see what's kind of going on inside of us, right?
Oh, and that's my favorite movie. And I watched that with my kids last night. So
Aw.
So it's really fresh.
it's really fresh.
It's definitely one of my favorite Disney movies they've done, for sure.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, lots of good information and just and fun at the same time. Like they didn't, they turned it into a learning show with a lot of knowledge from different areas, but it was enjoyable. It was fun to watch. It was heartwarming, like the whole story, first and second one.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. Well, you said you're opening your practice now, and you do participate over at Koru doing some ketamine therapy as well. So that's one specialty that you do as well. Tell me a little bit about that. What inspired you? What drove you down a little bit to kind of explore the ketamine therapy side of things as you were getting licensed and finishing school?
Yeah. So, I was introduced to the idea of psychedelic assisted therapy through a podcast, Tim Ferriss podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Ferriss, but he wrote 4-Hour Work Week, 4-Hour Body, and anyways, I just am a bit of a fanboy of Tim Ferriss. And so he had people on his podcast, people like, there's a guy named Michael Pollan, and people like Sam Harris. And Michael Pollan, he wrote a book called How to Change Your Mind. Yeah, that really resonated with me, because I think one of the things that I got frustrated in the mental health field is that so many people are suffering, and we're not having a lot of success in reducing that suffering. And here was a thing that was introduced to me where it's like, here's psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, people described as like 12 years of therapy in 8 hours. And I was like, well, that sounds good.
Right.
Streamline the process.
Yeah. And streamline the process. And what happened was, as I got more and more interested in that, I was put in touch with somebody who could help me in my own journey of healing and doing psychedelic assisted therapy. Trying to decide how much I should talk about this right now. Yeah, what I'll say is this: I was able to do some psychedelic assisted therapy with a really, really qualified professional. It helped me break down some walls that were there, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to dedicate my life to.
So it's your own personal experience that kind of drove you? It helped you, it benefited your own mental health, so it drove you to want to share that with others?
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, on that same note, I mean, that's why we're all three sitting here today.
Yeah.
Is because I want to share all those experiences and different things that I've gone through and help people through that. I haven't gone to the extent that you have and gone back to school and got a master's degree and all that stuff, but this is our form, kind of the same line. You were part of some of those early journeys and early therapy sessions with me, and it impacted me so immensely. Like you say, 8 hour, a lifetime of therapy in 8 hours. I mean, that's a true statement. Like, you can process certain things so quickly and easily because your body is not holding you back. It's not restricting you when you're in that space.
Yeah. Well, you've been on a rocket ship. So, I mean, ever since
It kind of has.
And yeah, both of you have been on this rocket ship through this healing journey. And my journey has been a much slower pace. And so kudos to both of you for the journey that y'all have been on and for the dedication you have to helping others. I think it's just amazing.
No, we appreciate it. And we appreciate you being part of it. So,
yeah, thank you.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the big reason we wanted to sit down today, and that's internal family systems. It's been around for a long time. There's a lot of people who have done it, but it hasn't really been talked about, I guess, mainstream as much. I don't think, it's not one of these modalities that you hear about all the time until really just recently. And maybe it's just because I've been in it and I've been more aware to it, but it's being talked about a lot in our I Love You Bro groups. It's been talked a lot about. I've heard it on a couple other podcasts. So I feel like it's out there and it's really incredible. And so Richard Schwartz is kind of the father of internal family systems in a way. Like, he's kind of one of the ones that brought it more mainstream. Is that a good way to say it, Lincoln?
Yeah, the way that he describes it is he stumbled upon it. So
yeah,
he doesn't claim to be the person who invented it, but he's kind of the person who, as he says, kind of stumbled upon it as he was kind of finding his way professionally, and has popularized it.
Yeah. I mean, he's just brought it more awareness, I guess, maybe a good way.
Yeah.
And everybody, we'll put these notes in the podcast, but it's Richard Schwartz, and he has an amazing book that's called No Bad Parts. And we'll kind of get into that here in a little bit, but it's a phenomenal book. I recommend, if you want it, to get the hard copy and listen to it, because there's exercises and different really cool things in that book for anybody who's very interested in learning more about what we're going to talk about here today. So,
yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about internal family systems, Lincoln. What
is it?
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah.
For nobody who's heard about it before.
Yeah. So internal family systems therapy it's a therapy modality, but it's also kind of a paradigm for how to view your life.
Okay.
So a lot of people take it outside of the therapy room and think of it, more than that. It's just a way to think about how we exist in the world. And the idea is that we're made up of different parts. So a lot of people might resonate with this idea that we're made up of different parts. Maybe there's a part of me that says, ooh, I really want to eat a donut. And another part of me that says, don't eat that donut.
Okay.
Or there's a part that says, like, okay, let's get up, let's get out of bed, let's be productive, let's get things done. And another part that says, no, just no.
Yeah. That's most of my parts.
Yeah.
I just lay in bed. It's so nice here.
Very common. We call it a polarization, where these two parts that are kind of seemingly at ends with each other, where it's just like, hey, okay, let's do this. Another part, like, we're going to just not move.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll talk about the different parts and the different category of parts. So we have these different parts, and there's these different categories of parts. Most of our parts we call protector parts. These are parts of us that are trying to protect us. They're trying to do the right thing by protecting us in certain ways.
So with the protectors, they could protect you from, like, trauma that's happened so you don't have to relive it, correct? They could protect you from a situation by inducing fear, so that make you aware of a situation. Would that be another way to describe a protector a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll go into it a little bit more. So
Okay.
there's subcategories of protector parts.
Okay.
We have our manager protector parts
Uh-huh.
and our firefighter protector parts.
Okay.
So our manager protector parts, they're the parts of us that say like, okay, let's get up, let's get going, let's do these things. These are the parts of us that are proactive in making sure bad things don't happen to us. So they're the parts of us that maybe make to-do lists. These are the things we got to get done today. These are this. And then they're the parts of us that might get a little anxious. Like, okay, these are the bad things that might happen if we're not looking out for that. These are people, places, things that we need to keep away from. These are the parts of us that might get anxious. These are the parts of us that might get critical. Parts of us that say, you screwed up. You're an idiot. Why would you do that? These are the parts of us that might say like, okay, you need to be tough. You need to be in control over the situation. You need to make sure that everybody's taken care of, and you got to be the rock.
Okay.
So this is kind of an example of some examples of our manager protector parts.
Okay.
And then we have our firefighter protector parts. These are the parts of us that will put out the flames of emotion by any means necessary.
Mm.
So these are the same way a firefighter will go into a building and smash open a door or break a window to put out a fire. These are the parts of us that will kind of, put out the flames of emotions, and they're not too worried about the consequences of doing that.
Mhm.
So these are the parts of us that might numb out by
Mhm.
sex, drugs, alcohol. Parts of us that might numb out on social media or dissociate, just kind of turn off.
Maybe diving into work.
Yeah. Workaholism, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes there's a kind of a hierarchy of these firefighter protector parts where ultimately there's a suicidal firefighter protector part that says we can really put these flames out if we really need to and end this whole thing. So these are our protector parts. And I could talk about the next category of parts.
Yeah.
Unless anything else, any questions about or anything that I need to expand on as it relates to the protector
No,
part.
it definitely makes sense with the protector side of it, having those two, because the manager part protects us from being able to just even run our own lives. But then the firefighter parts help with the deep, hurtful stuff. So it definitely makes sense.
Yeah. So kind of going to the deep hurtful stuff.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that now, which is this other category of parts we call our exiles.
Okay.
These are the parts of us, they're not like our protectors because they don't have jobs. And these parts of us at one point were young children, carefree, creative, compassionate, and connected little children.
Okay.
And then something happened to them that was outside of their control. And people and situations and life events put burdens on these parts of us. Burdens are feelings and beliefs about themselves that they're unlovable, that they're unworthy, that they're bad, that they're too little or they're too much. Things like that. And so these younger parts of us were burdened with these things. And that's when our protector parts came in and started doing their job.
Okay.
Because protector parts, they don't want that young child to be further burdened. Also, that young child is often crying out for help and attention and to be seen and heard and understood. And that emotion can be overwhelming to the system. And there can be maybe some negative consequences for being overwhelmed that way. And so our protector parts push that down to make sure that we don't get overwhelmed by that young exile.
Okay.
So the protector parts then kind of the exiles here living life and something happens or, different situations and those protectors come in and do exactly what it's described. They're protecting and they kind of push that part out of the way and say, nope, I'm going to take over now. Is that kind of a good way to describe that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. They just kind of come in and make sure that, that doesn't happen again. Kind of just push that down because the exile is still there and they're kind of just stuck in the past and they're burdened with those heavy burdens that they're carrying. And our protector parts oftentimes are just really trying to get that part in the back corner to make sure that it isn't seen or isn't it doesn't overwhelm us.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that kind of the two? I mean, the categories, or do we have more categories of the internal,
There's
the
more.
system?
There's more.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
well, what I'll say is this first. There's this analogy that is laid out in that book, No Bad Parts, and the analogy is kind of like our protector parts are on a bus, and they're going on a road trip, and they all compete for who gets to drive the bus.
Mhm.
So our manager part might wake up and say, okay, we got to get this done. We got to do these things. We got to get ahead of things. And then maybe a critical part comes in and says, like, you effed up. You didn't do that. And now you're an idiot. Why would you screw that thing up? You got to do better. You got to be better. And then maybe there's a firefighter part that's like, okay, well, you guys are just freaking out over there. You need to calm down. We're just going to numb this out. We're just going to turn this off. And so that part might come in and turn it off and just kind of smooth things over. And then afterwards, that critical part might jump back in, like, what'd you do that for? Now we're even further behind. And now you're an idiot. Why are you such an idiot? And then it just kind of goes along like that, where it's kind of this, oftentimes it's kind of like a dysfunctional family where everybody has their role and they all think that the way that they go about things is the best way.
Mhm.
And that what the other part is doing is just making things worse. But that's why I really like the title of that book, No Bad Parts.
Right.
That all of these parts of us, even the parts that maybe some other parts think are just really heinous and horrible, all these parts are actually really good. And they want what's best for us. And um, they're trying the best they know how to do what's best for us and to help us. The problem is these parts of us are kind of like parentified children. I don't know if you've heard the term parentified, but it's the idea that in a family system, sometimes a child takes on the role of an adult.
Okay.
So in some family systems, um, maybe that child has to provide financially for the family because their family is struggling financially. Or maybe that child at a young age has to provide emotionally for a family, where sometimes the parents are emotionally immature
Mhm.
and they go to the child for a shoulder to cry on. And that doesn't really leave space for
The child.
the child to cry on their parent's shoulder.
Yeah.
And so the child kind of takes on that parent role. And that happens in our internal family as well,
Mhm.
where sometimes these parts of us that say like, okay, you got to step up, you got to be the man of the house, or you got to um whatever their roles are. They took on these roles at a really young age, and they're often unequipped for doing that at that age. And so they feel like they have to be extreme in the way they go about their job. And with those different extremes that our parts are experiencing, they all kind of just butt heads with each other.
Mm.
So then there is the self. There is the you who is not a part. There is the core of who you are, your true self.
Okay.
And your true self is somebody who embodies the 8 C's of the self.
The 8 C's.
Yeah, the 8 C's of the self. So there's who you really are is a person who's calm and clear and compassionate and connected and courageous and curious and confident. And I always forget one. There's
I say, okay, do we need to start naming them off?
Let's see if I can do this. I always forget one every time I name one. So there's calm, clear, compassionate, connected, confident, courageous, curious. Dang it. I'm gonna have to
There's one more.
There's one more than there. Yeah.
Those are awesome. I like the 8 C's.
Yeah, well, that's who you really are.
Okay.
That's who you are at your core. And so the work of IFS therapy is to get your parts to know your true self, to get to know who you really are, and for you to get to know your parts and understand them and listen to them and understand what they're afraid of and why they've been doing this job.
Okay.
Also understand how old they are. Sometimes it's really revealing to just go to these parts, ask them how old they are, and to discover that they're oftentimes in the single digits in terms of how old they are. And as you get to know these parts, and as these parts get to know you, you can build trust trust is built between the two of you. And as that trust is built, you can get permission from these protector parts to go to these younger exiled parts. And as you go to those younger exiled parts, you can listen to them and understand what they're really going through, and what their burdens are, and how they've been carrying those burdens. And after witnessing them, you can help them unburden from those burdens that they're carrying. And after they're able to unburden, you can bring in those protector parts, let them see that unburdened, exiled child, and they can go and do the jobs that they would rather do. Oftentimes, these protector parts don't want to be doing what they're doing, but they feel like they have to. And so these protector parts can then go back to doing what they would rather be doing, and there can be more harmony in the system, and you can be led from a place of self rather than from a place of a part that is afraid. So yeah, that's the goal of IFS therapy.
Well, and if anybody listened to my story, the first part, towards the end, Emily was talking about that, and she had said something along the lines of that she could see myself shining through now. Like she could see more of myself just being there. Like I didn't have all these different pieces that were kind of holding me back, and I've kind of broken through some of those barriers and got some of my parts now working together instead of against each other.
Yeah.
And that's been a beautiful, beautiful thing for me as I've been working on this and learning about it. And this really brings up now, I think as we were talking a little bit about this, I kind of want to share some of my work that I've done just to kind of, I guess, open people's eyes and see what it's really kind of about and how it's affected what I've been working on, and have Hillary kind of talk about what she's seen from her point of view as these things have been happening. And I guess the first one is in my third ketamine session, and you were there for this one. We came out of it, and during that session, I was able to see all of my parts. I got to see, this guy over here doing this guy over here doing this. One that stands out is I got to see the guy cooking dinner, dancing in the kitchen, rolling around, playing on the floor with the kids. I got to see the younger kid who was taking care of his sister. Like I got to see all of these parts during that. And I was able to say, I like this one, and I like this one, and I like this one, and kind of grab onto those parts. And as I was doing that, the other ones who had been more prominent, the protector firefighters, kind of released a little bit and says, okay, we'll let's let you be this person. Let's let you have this. It's okay. We can feel this. And during that session, I was able just to kind of work through, see all those different parts of me, pick the ones that I wanted. And as I came out, I was like, I felt just kind of this relief. One is because all of a sudden, all these parts are now, hey, let's hang out together. Like I felt more complete. I felt like I knew who I was. I had a different view of myself, and I had a path of this is where I want to go. And now I know that I've got to work with this part, this part, this part, this part, so we can all start kind of, heading down the path together instead of trying to pull each other off the path just because we're afraid of something or just because we are scared of something that happened in the past and we don't want it to happen again. And so as I was working through that session, I mean, that was incredible. And that was kind of my first experience really personally with IFS, and kind of as I was exploring and seeing that, hey, there's a lot more to me than just this one. It's just not me. It's all these different situations, all these different things have made me who I am. And during that time, it's realizing to have compassion for those parts, to thank those parts for what they've done. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for letting me experience this pain. But now I'm going to learn from this. You don't have to protect me anymore from this pain because I've experienced it. I've worked through it, and you've shown me how to do that. And now it's okay to let me live. Now it's okay to let me kind of out of this cocoon, I guess is a good way to say it, and open my wings and kind of fly again, because now I've worked through what they were protecting me from, and I'm okay with it, and they're okay with it because they've seen that, hey, he can handle this now.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is that in this ketamine experience, you were able to connect with self. I'm hearing you say that there was these memories of being with your kids, of dancing in the kitchen, of playing. And there's also, I mentioned that the 5 or the 8 C's of the self. There's also 5 P's, and I'm not gonna get these all right either. but there's a persistent and present and playful and persistent. And my rule is that I always forget one. So there's one more. Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that you were able to connect with that self, to bring back those memories of all those times that you were in that self energy, and your protector parts were able to just relax for a little bit and step back. And that's one of the beautiful things of ketamine therapy, is for whatever reason, it just kind of allows our protector parts to relax for a little bit, and the core of who we are becomes more at the forefront. And our parts can see that. They can see who you really are. And when they're able to see that, then there's trust built, and they can kind of relax a little bit, knowing that the adult is there, that they don't have to be the adult.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there was some unburdening that you experienced as well, that even those younger parts that were burdened with heavy burdens were able to let go of some of those burdens.
Yeah.
Which creates even more harmony in your system amongst your parts. Yeah.
I was going to ask Hill, like, kind of what that week looked like. I'm pretty sure that one's pretty high on our list that we remember.
Yeah.
What was your, I guess, view looking from the outside in, as I had experienced that, and as those were coming out? Like, what did you see happen with me during kind of that week as I was working through that?
That week was a little bit of a roller coaster emotionally for both of us, I feel like. You always have that 3-day mark. So 3 days after you do your treatment, he has almost these huge epiphanies, or these huge realizations that just come to the forefront and just rocket you through. It's kind of cool to watch. He gets really excited and also emotional. And I remember you just having these massive epiphanies, like one right after the other, where just all of the puzzle pieces were starting to connect. And these huge realizations, the fact that you were able to share a lot of those with me was amazing, because you were so closed off before that. I mean, not fully closed off, but just, I mean, there was a good several months to a year when you were suffering that you were definitely completely closed off. You were not sharing things with me. You were stuck in your shame, and I think your guilt. And so it was so relieving to feel like I had my husband back. I had this person that we can connect on a deeper level, and that we can share what is going on with us. And I felt like I had that back. And for every session that you had after that, there was even more and more and more that was coming to the forefront. You were calmer. You were more serene. You were more just connected to yourself, to me, to your family, all of those things.
Yeah, and I think one thing in that session is we talked about naming our parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a few of us in that group had names for some of our parts. One that has stuck, and you might laugh at this, one that has stuck with me is Francis. So Francis, to me, is my chaos part. Like, just playful, out of control, just wants to go, it's just chaos. And so now, here as a family, Francis is a now family name. If anybody gets crazy in our house, we ask them if their Francis is showing.
Yeah.
But I remember that was really powerful when we talked about is actually giving the name that the part's a name. So you're not just, hey, you're my protector. It's like, no, hey, you know what? We're going to have a talk with Barbara, or we're going to have a talk with Francis, or we're going to have a talk with George or Frank today because he's the one that's saying this, or he's the one I feel is just really dominant right now. And that, what's the kind of the meaning behind that, Lincoln? Why does when we give them a name, why is it easier to have those discussions? Why is it easier to process?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends. Maybe you could tell me why it's been easier for you. Can I just flip that question back to you? What's that been like for you to give these parts a name?
I guess it gives them a voice.
Mm-hmm.
I get the easiest way to describe it. They have a voice now that they can express. Now it's just not, they're just not a piece of me. It's, I'm doing this job for you. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, and I wonder if for you, giving that part that name has allowed you to show up with that part from a place of self rather than like being blended with that part. So there's the idea of oftentimes we're blended with our parts, where these parts feel like that's who we are. That oh, I am just this person that does this behavior, and that's just who I am. And one of the first steps that we take in IFS therapy is asking those parts if they're willing to unblend from us. We just ask them. Sometimes they say no, and that's okay. But sometimes they are able to unblend, and we can be with that part from a place of self rather than being that part, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if we're with that part from a place of self, we can be with that part from a place of compassion and curiosity. Like, oh, here's Francis here. What is it? How are you trying to help Francis? And what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do these things? And that can be really revealing to ask that part those kinds of questions.
Yeah. And it's really just being open and vulnerable with yourself to kind of vocalize internally those questions, right? I mean, that's a big part of IFS therapy is the vulnerability with yourself and the vulnerability of opening these doors that possibly you haven't opened before.
Yeah, and well, what I'll say is this: is sometimes these parts aren't ready to be vulnerable, and it is not the role of IFS therapy to force these parts to be vulnerable. Sometimes we can check in with these parts, and they're like, "No, we're not going to do this right now," and we roll with that. We're not forcing these parts to push past what they're uncomfortable with, but we're just curious what their
Actual role is.
yeah, we'll be curious what their role is and if they do want to share. And there may be other parts that, oftentimes we'll spend time with a part and other parts come in and try and shut that part down. And we just follow that. So that's kind of the beauty, I think, of this therapy modality is there's no we just follow with what's present instead of forcing something that parts feel uncomfortable with. I also like it because my role as a therapist it kind of takes the pressure off me, to be honest, because because I'm not I don't claim to be an expert in somebody else's life story. I don't have more intelligence or wisdom than the person sitting in the room with me.
Mhm.
But what I get to do is I have some familiarity with this model, and I've been trained in this model, and I can kind of hold people's hands as they walk through this model and do their own healing work. And I just get to be kind of a compassionate witness as they heal themselves.
Kind of their guide.
Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of have the roadmap. They're the ones walking it, and you can give the suggestions as you're going down. You can take this path or this path or this path and kind of help them.
Yeah, and the goal is to help people get in their own self energy, and when they're able to do that, then they take the reins.
Right.
Then they know how to heal their own internal
Right.
parts. Yeah.
So something that keeps coming to my mind is the split personality side of it, which I know is more of an extreme side of the internal family systems. I don't know why it keeps coming to the forefront, but the movie Split,
Yeah.
if you're familiar with it. there's a man that has these extreme split personalities. He's named all of them, and they all have the different roles in his life. He's got the child and the protector and the monster and all of these different parts of him. And I think that movie is actually a very good explanation of one, split personalities, but they don't actually explain that it is the internal family systems idea of that.
Mm-hmm.
On the extreme side, how does that come about?
Yeah, so there's this, I don't know if you've heard of the DSM, but the DSM is this manual that therapists use to diagnose people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the diagnoses in there is dissociative identity disorder, or DID,
Uh-huh.
which used to be called, did it used to be called split personality disorder? Is there another, what was the other thing it used to be called? Anyways, there was this kind of way of pathologizing this, and the way that I guess an IFS approach to that kind of diagnosis would be is that somebody with DID is somebody who has a lot of extreme trauma,
Uh-huh.
and their protector parts became extremely polarized. And so they became these protector parts became
Dominant.
Very dominant and very polarized against each other, where these parts,
They're constantly fighting against each other.
yeah,
And when you were saying with driving the bus, they're constantly fighting to drive the bus.
yeah,
Is that a good...
yeah. So it's kind of like that. And somebody that, has DID, the IFS way of approaching them is just the idea that they're like, well, their trauma is really significant and their parts are really extreme.
Yeah.
That's another thing about IFS is it's non-pathologizing. So diagnosing is not something that I focus on a lot. The way I conceptualize diagnosing is just the idea that, like, oh, there's been these traumatic events in this person's life, and these protector parts reacted in the best way that they knew how, or the way that really was appropriate for that time, to keep them alive. And then that part just kind of is stuck in the past that way.
Yeah.
But diagnosing isn't something that I spend a lot of time on, more just curiosity about why that protector part needs to act that extreme.
The other question I had, so when you're in a hardcore addiction, your body shuts down and your brain shuts down to the natural, I'm going to mess this up, but fight or flight and survival mode. Is that part of internal family systems of that the survival mode, the fight or flight? Is that the same idea as internal family systems, or is that something completely different?
Yeah. So your question is, when somebody's in a hardcore addiction,
Yeah,
and say they're strung out on heroin or something like that, then their fight or flight capacities aren't available. Is that?
yeah. So what is usually the cause of shutting down into just survival mode? And is that part of the internal family system
Yeah.
part?
Well, let me know if I'm answering this question correctly, but what I would say is that the part that engages in addiction, or the part that engages in hardcore addiction, is a really scared firefighter part.
Okay. Because you also mentioned that the suicidal thoughts are the firefighter part as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a sense, it's almost you trying to shut yourself down from those emotions, from those feelings, and the firefighter parts are taking over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think with your question, that kind of leads into something we talked about. And what I'd like to do now, Lincoln, is kind of just walk through a scenario with you. I've kind of talked to Hillary about this. I have personally kind of worked through this already, with Emily and doing some other work myself. But this is a huge example of her question and how our protector parts take over. And then we can kind of talk about how the experience was working through this with me through IFS and how it's kind of impacted me.
Yeah.
And have you kind of analyze as I'm talking about this, kind of as we go through it, of how this is working, if you're okay with that.
Sounds good.
So with my last session, I was able to open up and some of my protector parts kind of relaxed a little bit. And this is when I started reading the No Bad Parts book. And I'm doing it. And as he goes through it, as you know, there's some exercises that he has you do. So you can start practicing some of these things. You start and you have, try to just see the parts that are there and that are vocal is kind of the first one. What's the loudest part? What's the first thing you hear when you just kind of close your eyes and just take a minute and listen? And as I did that, and this is about 3-4 days, kind of my timeline after my last ketamine session with Emily. And as I did that, this part kind of, I could hear him just loudly. He's like, you're ready for this. There's something that you need to see. There's something that I need to show you. I've been protecting this part for so long from you. And I think you're ready. And so that's kind of the initial. Is that pretty common? I guess is my first question before I kind of go in with people of kind of how that sometimes happens. Is the part just says, I'm okay with this now.
Yeah. I guess what I'm hearing you say is, a little bit what we talked about, that oftentimes for whatever reason, ketamine helps our protector parts relax and to see who we really are and to trust who we really are. And I'm hearing you say that in this experience, there was this part of you to let you know that it trusted you.
Yeah. And as we go through this, so there's another book that really relates to this, and it's called The Body Never Forgets.
The body keeps the score.
The body keeps score.
It keeps a score, yeah.
And in that book, it talks about how trauma is held in your body, how, physically, mentally, all these things. So March 24th was the day last year that I had my suicide attempt. I didn't think I was going to be here anymore. And with this revelation and all this work that had happened over a couple of weeks ago, this part has said, I need to show you this. And this was just a few days after that date. And that date has been just an awful date for me for years. Like that week is so stressful. And I look back and like every year for as long as I can remember, it's an awful time.
Always struggled during March.
Always. And so now I've had this little incitement with this protector part, and he said, I'm ready to show you this. I'm like, okay. And again, sometimes therapy, you'll get triggered by something. Like it's not immediate. Sometimes there's a memory or a picture or something that kind of triggers an event that you remember. And what had happened is I'd had this conversation earlier that day with, kind of myself and said it was ready. And I just kind of went on with my day. I was like, okay, it'll come up when things come up. And I was out riding my bike. It was a beautiful day. And again, that's kind of where I get to shut down, get to enjoy things. That's just my place. I can just, be me. And as I was riding my bike, I just got in a great state of mind. I got finished. I got back in the truck, getting all ready to go back. And I was just flipping through my phone really fast, find something I was going to listen to. And all of a sudden those memories pop up on, Facebook or whatever, or in your phone. They just pop up. Hey, this happened, so-and-so years ago on this day. And one of those pictures had popped up on March 24th of 2016. There was a picture of jerky, of all things. And instantly, and I just called it this, just the overwhelming emotion and just experience dump. I was enlightened. All of a sudden, every single second of March 24th in 2016 came back to me. And it's one of these things that isn't talked about a lot. It's one of these extremes that I feel happens. It happens more to women than it happens to men. And it's definitely not talked about in the men's world. And so I felt like, hey, this is a good time to talk about it, but also explore how this has helped me. And so this picture of jerky came up, and what it was is that jerky was a gift to me that day. I had recently had knee surgery a couple days before, so I was just kind of home, just hanging out, just recovering. And I had some, I thought they were friends at the time, come over and hang out with me. And my wife at the current time went to work that night, and these friends, which were female, were just going to hang out, make sure I was okay, and just kind of take care of me for the night. And the one left, the one stayed. And not to go into too much detail, what had happened is obviously I'm recovering, I'm on some pain pills. and she started making drinks. And so she, had a drink or two as we're sitting there, and, again, we're just hanging out, just trying to keep me company as I'm recovering. And then she started feeding me these drinks. And when you mix alcohol and you mix pain pills, it's never a good situation. And what had happened is that continued and continued and continued. And I remember very vividly calling a friend of mine and saying, I'm in a bad situation. I don't like where this is going. And again, this is all memories that are coming up. I remember that. And they're like, well, I'm not in a situation I can help you. I recommend just go in your room, shut your door, and, just try and get out of it. As I did that, this person, coerced me and did different things. So what ended up happening is I ended up blacking out that night. And again, I think my protector part is the one that said, boom, I'm shutting this off so you can't see what's going on. And I was raped that night. Just because, she knew that she could take advantage of me in the state of mind I was in. And that became the catalyst. I mean, this is March 24th of 2016. That became the catalyst of everything that happened in my life going forward. My drinking all of a sudden became very heavy. Started, using different substances again. We lost our business, lost our house, moved trying to get away out of the situation, and nothing was making it better. Everything continued to go, just downhill. That moment was the catalyst. And so my protector part said, I'm going to not let you see this. Literally, Lincoln, I did not remember that this had happened until just a couple of weeks ago as this. And now looking back, like, I was aware of parts of it during that time, but the more I kind of got through it, the more my protector part started taking over and erasing or blocking a lot of that memory. And that's, for me, a very good example of what has happened with how my protector parts have taken over and pushed me into, hey, we're going to numb this because we don't want you to feel this pain. So I guess kind of my question now, so I've got to this point and I've worked through this. I'm very comfortable. I'm sharing this. I'm very comfortable with the situation. I understand what happened. I understand that it wasn't my fault. I understand now that my protector was really trying to keep that pain away from me. Didn't want me to feel all that pain, feel all that hurt, feel all that shame of what had happened. I think the shame is the biggest component of that. But as I'm talking about this, I'd like to have, what's your thoughts of how I was kind of being able to work through that? And what are your suggestions now that this is open? I'm working on it like it's part of my life now, and that I can say, hey, this happened to me, but I'm not going to let it control me. As a internal family systems therapist, how would you approach that going forward? What would be a few key things you would do if we were having this as a therapy session right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve, or that wasn't right, and that shouldn't have happened. Sorry.
Sexual assault should never happen.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you say that now there's some curiosity. There's been a lot of healing, and there's also some curiosity about what to do next. I'm hearing you say that there's this understanding that there was this protector part that came in that did its job by pushing that out, by numbing that, to protect you from the shame that maybe that exiled part was holding on to. And I'm hearing you say that there's some permission there. And if we were working together, I guess what I would do is I would see if you can find where that part is that experienced that traumatic event. If you can find that part in your body. And if you can, I would ask you how you feel toward that part of you. And there might be parts of you that say, like, oh, I'm scared of that part, or parts that say, I wish that part would go away, or something like that. And if that's the case, then we can spend some time with those protector parts. Or maybe there's a feeling of openness towards that part of you that experienced that. Maybe there's some compassion for that part. Maybe there's feeling bad for that part and wanting to help it. And if that's the case, I would ask you to get close to that part and ask that part what that part is going through Ask that part what it wants to share with you. And then I would ask you to not think about how that part might respond, but to just ask that and then just see what comes up. And then I would ask you to continue to witness that part and continue to make sure that that part knows that you get it. That part knows that you understand what it went through and what the burdens are, what burdens it's carrying from a result of having experienced that. And then I would ask you to ask the part if it's ready to get out of there, if it's ready to go to a different place and come to the present moment with you and get out of that stuck place. And you can take these parts to different places. You could take it to a place real or imaginary. And then I would ask you to ask that part where it carries those burdens in its body. And that part might respond by, saying maybe this part carries its burdens in its chest or shoulders or something. And then I'd ask you to ask that part if it's ready to let go of those burdens. And that part can give up those burdens to the elements like the light, the sky, the earth, fire, water. And once those burdens are released, then we can bring in those protector parts and see how they respond to that and see if they're ready to take on different roles now, if they're ready to relax the roles that they've been taking on and take on roles that they'd rather do rather than take on these roles that they're forced to do out of necessity.
Well, initially, as you're talking through that, I mean, my first thing that comes to mind is the compassion piece. I feel like I'm very compassionate. Like, I understand what that part went through. I understand now. I have that feeling. I know the trauma that was there, now and how it affected me. And I just want to just wrap my arms around it for a second to sit with it and say, thank you. I'm sorry that this happened. And I'm grateful that part of me was able to hold that pain away until I was ready to experience it, I guess ready to process it. Mm-hmm. Because as I've been processing this the last couple of weeks, it has not been painful. Mm-hmm. It's been educational. Mm-hmm. It's been having more compassion for myself, giving myself a little grace for some of the things that happened, following that. And then it's also been, very spiritual in a way of being able to connect to something that's bigger than me, that I know it's okay. It wasn't my fault. And Emily had said this before is, life happens to you and you're not responsible for the things that happen to you, but you are responsible on taking ownership of how you react and how you move forward with those things. Mm-hmm. And that's been really that's the first thoughts of what you just said is kind of on my forefront of that's where I need to just focus for a minute with this, is being okay. And one thing with that is I really feel that voicing this out loud for me is very exhilarating. I don't know if exhilarating is the right word. Empowering is probably a better word.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like there's probably somebody listening to this right now that has gone through a very extreme trauma. Maybe something like that. Maybe witnessing, a family member getting beaten, or maybe themselves being beaten, or different things.
Witness to a death,
or any of these type of traumas that we classify as very, very high trauma. A lot of stress comes out of them. And that, I guess, is a message right now I just feel like to share is, it's okay. Don't let that trauma define you. Take it and learn from it. Work through it so you can understand it. You don't have to understand the person. You don't have to understand why they did what they did. But as we were talking, and, there's no bad parts. It's the name of this book. He interviews thousands of murderers, rapists, all these people in jail. I remember he talking about that the first of the book as he was doing research. And every one of those people had the same thing in common. They all had a protector part, like you said, that had been polarized to an extreme where they had to take on this extreme level of protection because something bad had happened to them. And that's really kind of what takes people's into that realm. Like nobody is a bad person. We're not born babies and come out with, knives or hatchets or guns in our hands. We have no bad intentions when we come into this world. It's the experiences that happen to us that kind of form who we are. And if we have these massive, horrible experiences and we don't have the tools to deal with them, then these protectors take over and take it to the complete extreme.
Mm.
And so I guess that's one really amazing thing about internal family systems for me now and for therapy is it's giving all these extra tools that weren't available or I didn't have available before. So now I'm able to process this because that trauma did take me to do a lot of horrible things. And, over the course of years, there was a lot of horrible things I did. But now looking back at it, that was the reason that all these things kind of came to fruition is because the parts of me didn't want me to experience that trauma and they were trying to keep me as far away from that as possible. And unfortunately, it was, involved trauma to other people. And that's typically what happens when you experience a lot of that stuff from what I've learned with internal family systems.
Yeah. When you're saying that, it made me think about another book with another really good title, which is Oprah. She wrote a book, and I forgot the name of the co-author, but they wrote a book, and it's called What Happened to You?
Hmm.
And a lot of the premise of the book is we often ask ourselves the question, what's wrong with me? When that's not the right question. The better question is, what happened to me? And I guess I would take that a step further is, and if I were to use, IFS language, is what happened to these parts of me? And there's an idea there that these parts of me have been damaged or have been burdened. But as you were talking about your story and how you've been healing through this, I'm hearing you say that you're able to be with those parts and not be overwhelmed with those parts and not take on the burdens of shame and other burdens from those parts. And you're able to just be with these parts with compassion, which is another really amazing discovery in IFS, is that the idea that our true selves can't be damaged. That who we are at our core is a person who's whole and not able to be damaged. And this work is not about building ourselves up to be something that we should be, but it's the idea that we already are that person. We already are whole. And the work is just helping those parts of us that need help and that kind of get in the way of being our true selves to be able to be healed and relaxed so that we can be who we already are.
I'm curious. So with certain people, some traumas that happen to them, for Scott's story, for example, you black it out or you shut it down or you push it away, versus my own experience in a trauma that I experienced, it rather than blacking it out, it was an alarm clock that happened during this traumatic experience. I had a roommate that had overdosed and died, and we were doing CPR, and he had several alarm clocks going on in the house. And unfortunately, the alarm clock was a trigger for me. And for me, for months and months and months, almost even a couple of years after that, every time I heard an alarm clock, I would go into a panic attack and immediately be taken back to that. So how is it that with some traumas and people, they can black it out, but some people, it's like that immediate trigger? Like, is that, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the difference between those?
First of all, I'm so sorry you experienced that.
I've done a lot of work with it, so
Yeah.
I can sit with it now. But it did take me a long time, that just hearing an alarm clock. I still don't really like alarm clocks, but
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
just it triggers that. But I did do a lot of EMDR
Mhm.
to help with that and whatnot. But yeah, it just makes me curious as to why some people shut down and some people don't, but immediately their body just goes into panic mode.
Yeah. Well, I guess the way that I would conceptualize that
Uh,
is um we call that an exile jailbreak,
okay.
where oftentimes our parts are trying to push these parts down, and the emotion of that experience and the intensity of that experience is not something that is healthy to be felt all the time.
Yeah.
And so these parts, these protector parts of us just will push that down, but then there can be something that triggers that exiled part that allows it to break through those protector parts.
Mm, yeah.
And that's how I would conceptualize what people call PTSD
Yeah.
or um, panic attacks.
Yeah, because we see that a lot with like veterans even
Hmm.
having panic attacks, hear a gunshot or fireworks or things like that. And they're they're immediately taken back to the traumatic situation that they experienced during war, during, the things that they had gone through while they were serving our countries. So
Yeah.
it's interesting that some people can just block, just that their protectors will just completely push it away. And then some almost even a disassociation from their self, and they come out. The childlike is that the part that is reacting?
Yeah.
I
And
can't.
not necessarily all of our exiles are children. We
Children.
can have
Yeah.
exiles that are older as well that experience these traumatic things.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, how I would conceptualize that is that, yeah, there's this part that is experiencing this thing that really maybe needed somebody to be there for them and to help them through that.
Hmm.
And those parts are screaming out for help and
Yeah.
screaming out for to be seen and heard and understood and to be held. And yeah, I'm hearing you say that you had that experience where this part would jump through in an alarm clock when you heard an alarm clock. And I think EMDR is wonderful, and
It did a lot of great for me.
yeah,
So
I think that's fantastic that
I'm
you're able to
yeah.
do that. And I guess my curiosity goes towards like, yeah, are there parts there that would benefit from you being there for them in the way they needed back then?
Hmm.
If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah.
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 So, I've got a question for you.
Hmm.
As we've been talking about this, and you did say, kind of one reason you're doing therapy and the types of therapy you're doing now was driven because of your personal experiences and how it helped you. But since you've been in the therapy world and working with clients, is there a moment or a situation that's come up that just stands out that was incredible, that you were able to really help somebody, that maybe you would want to share how that felt or maybe what that experience kind of was, because it kind of solidified you and what you were doing, that this is what you want to do.
Without breaking HIPAA.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I was gonna say that all the time, and yeah, I definitely need to be need to respect people's confidentiality, so I'm not going to be specific. Um, but all the time that it is, um, I'm blown away by how deep this work gets, by how people really have conversations with these parts. When I was first learning this and I was first asking people to have conversations with parts of them, I was really surprised that they were getting answers from parts of them that they were surprised by.
Ah,
Where, I would ask them to like, okay, can you talk to this part and ask it what its job is? And they'd be like, oh, this part, I didn't understand that this part has been protecting me this way. And I would ask them, oh, can you ask this part now how old this part thinks you are? Like, this part just told me that it thinks I'm 7 years old. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, geez. I'm blown away that you're able to have these internal conversations so uh, palpably. Like there really are these conversations that are happening internally, and experiencing people get permission from their protected parts and go to these exiled parts and unburden them from, because they're, some people are these exiled parts, and these protector parts have been, they're 8 years old and they've been stuck that way for 40 years sometimes. And when they're able to allow these parts to get out of that stuck place, um, it's incredible and deeply spiritual, and healing happens. And I am so honored to be a witness of that, because again, my role is to just kind of be a compassionate witness as people do this work, and to kind of help them to walk through this modality. But for the most part, I just have the great blessing of being with them as they do that. And it's a great way to spend an afternoon.
I'm curious.
Wonderful.
I'm curious. Have you heard of the empty chair therapy?
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of the internal family systems. I actually have done empty chair therapy and I've witnessed it. My work has done quite a bit with the empty chair therapy as well. For those that aren't familiar with it, it's very similar. You're talking to an empty chair, but you're almost pulling that other part out and talking to that part as itself.
Mhm.
I remember when I did it, it was similar. They asked me, how old is this person? How old is this part of Hillary that you're talking to?
Yeah.
Going back into childhood, what happened to them at this time? How did they feel? Things like that. What is your opinion about empty chair therapy?
Yeah, it's very similar.
Mhm.
Yeah, very similar. The only difference is I don't have an empty chair.
No.
But yeah, that's the
Yeah.
Gestalt empty chair technique, which I think probably IFS took from that.
Yeah.
Well, I think in Dr. Schwartz's book, there's a chapter that he says that he's been in therapy sessions where he's got like 10 chairs set up, that this person kept moving chairs and having more conversations. If I remember right, I think that was in the first of that book. He was saying that that's kind of how things started for him as he was exploring it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, very. And how was that for you?
It was good. At first it felt a little wonky. I'll admit it. It felt odd. I think I was a little reserved to it. Maybe I wasn't ready for it, and I thought it was just kind of cuckoo. I'm talking to my 7-year-old self. Like, I don't feel like this is helping. But later on, looking back on it and seeing a handful of people go through it as well, I see the benefits to it. So,
yeah. And by the way, that's very common, that oftentimes like, okay, can you talk to this part? And they'll be like, this is some woo-woo, weird witchy stuff.
I just don't think I was super open to it at the time.
So. Well, yeah. So oftentimes people have a very logical, analytical part that they're blended with. And so to do this kind of thing that feels a little bit woo-wooey, we first need to spend some time with that analytical part and address, how is that analytical part helping you? How has that been beneficial? Also, how does that analytical part sometimes maybe get in the way? And is there some help we can give to that part?
See, I wish my therapist would have said that, would have engaged that during the time. It was in a group therapy, so I think it was, I was the example that they were trying to portray of how this modality works. But I wish they would have, because I remember even saying, I feel like this is stupid.
Yeah.
So I wish they would have kind of gone back to that. Why is your analytical part saying that this is stupid?
Yeah. And understand, we're not trying to push past the analytical part. We're trying to understand the did I say political? The analytical part.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good way to look at it.
So as we kind of wrap up here, Lincoln, I've got a question that's been on my mind. We've talked about a lot of stuff. We kind of walked through a scenario that I had. We've talked about why you do this. We've talked about the internal family system modality. But as people are listening, what are a couple items that you would recommend? I mean, we've talked about Dr. Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts, but if people are curious, they're interested in internal family systems, they think that maybe this is something that could help them, is there some resources or possibly some tools that you would recommend for them to maybe start exploring this other than reaching out to you and sitting in a chair with you?
Well, yeah, I want to highlight again that book, No Bad Parts. There's also another book that I've been recommending that people have been finding maybe even more approachable, which is just the book Introduction to Internal Family Systems.
Okay.
Also written by Richard Schwartz. A little bit shorter of a book.
Not as clinical, probably.
Well, there's less stories in it.
Okay. Okay.
But it's people find it approachable, especially people that maybe are really blended with those analytical parts. I think people that are blended with those parts and want to view things from a logical, analytical perspective might prefer that book.
Okay.
And then the second thing I would say is that the IFS, there's an IFS directory where you can find therapists that have been trained through the IFS Institute. And so I would do that. I would Google IFS directory and you can look up therapists nearby that you can engage with. I guess those would be the two things that I would recommend.
Okay.
I think there's some IFS workbooks as well.
And obviously watch Inside Out, right?
And watch Inside Out. I'm telling you, I love that movie. I always do want to make a little bit of a clarification with that movie because sometimes that movie labels parts as emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I would take it a little bit step further and say that our parts, all of our parts can experience a range of emotions. And so it's a little bit different, but I would highly recommend watching Inside Out and Inside Out 2.
I love it.
For sure.
I love it. Well, Lincoln, as we wrap up, I know you listen to a few of our episodes, but we try to close each episode with having the guest, if there's any questions you have for us. You know, we've been sitting here, we talk about a lot of stuff. We kind of know a little bit about each other, but do you have any final questions for myself or for Hillary that have come up that you would like to know?
I guess for both of you, what's next? What's the next step for maybe, Hillary, what's the next steps for you here in this rocket ship of a journey that you've been on?
Well, as we were kind of talking earlier, I really look forward, once we finish the men's mental health, diving more into women's mental health as well. I look forward to sharing some more of my own personal stories. I have mentioned that Scott is the driver of this crazy bus that we're on. He is more of the forefront, and I've let him kind of just roll with this. And I look forward to just being involved in the podcast a little bit more and sharing a little bit more of myself with everybody as well.
Yeah, it sounds like the women's mental health program. Is that what is that? Can you tell me about that?
We would do a series on women's mental health, bringing in other guests, talking about the importance of women's mental health as well, just as much as men's mental health. We've dove into the men's mental health initially because of Scott's journey. I've had my own journey with my own mental health, and just maybe pinpointing and highlighting the differences between the two, but just the importance of mental health all around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, I can't wait. I can't wait for that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess for me, as we were talking a little bit, I mean, I'm getting my training done currently, and hopefully by the end of May, it's all finished, and I will be a licensed mental health crisis worker.
Wow.
And then I am also going to through the schooling to be able to then become an instructor. And so we want to then take what we're doing here on the podcast and put it out more into the world. We're working on building an entire instruction program around that, where I'm going to go into businesses and teach them a concept that's called mental health first aid. And it's kind of, having the skills to kind of respond to a mental health crisis, to have the skills to see when somebody's kind of starting down the road of substance abuse or when they're having trauma in their lives or different things, and having the skills and the resources to be able to guide them in the right direction. Not necessarily take on any of their issues, but teach them how to integrate that into their daily work situations, especially in construction and mining, which I've been heavily involved in for years, because there's a lot of disconnect with those guys. And we'll have safety meetings in the morning before every job starts. And so why are we not implementing, let's mentally check in with all of our coworkers and make sure everybody's okay to do their job, because at the end of the day, we want everybody to go home safe. So that's a huge part of safety in my eyes, is the mental health aspect that doesn't really get addressed as much. And so as I get my licensing and get all this training done over the next little bit, then we'll start reaching out and teaching companies these skills and this program that we're putting together, and hopefully to spread the message. And a big part of that has come from the people who have reached out to me over the last little bit, former coworkers, friends, of how much of an impact that we are having on them personally from some of the stuff we're sharing, and how they wish that these things were more talked about, these things were more, vocalized. And a lot of them, especially some old coworkers, are like, I wish we did more as a company. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where this idea is bred from. And so, that's the goal, is to go down those roads and start teaching human resource people, managers, superintendents, foremans, and anybody who wants to learn, essentially, to be a better person and how to connect with people. That's what we're going to be teaching. And so, anybody who is interested in that, reach out. We're looking at scheduling stuff for June now already, so we can start teaching these classes. And so we're happy to kind of expand that. And I guess the other thing is currently we are working on doing our first men's retreat. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have a men's weekend retreat where we're going to work, dive into some heavy stuff as men, and also do some fun stuff outdoors, just kind of reconnect with earth and reconnect as guys, because most guys like to go out and have fun and spend time outdoors. And so I'm working on putting a retreat together that'll be at the end of August, and that's going to be super exciting. So watch for information on that coming out.
Wow. Beautiful. So needed. And I'm so glad that you are spreading these healing, the availability of healing to a place where maybe the group of people that you're spending time with aren't aware or are oftentimes afraid of seeking out healing. And fantastic.
Well, Lincoln, thank you so much. This was
you.
wonderful. I hope that everybody's enjoyed it as much as we have in learning about internal family systems. We'll make sure to post all your information on the, podcast description if anybody wants to reach out and set up an appointment and see, maybe do a little therapist interview and see if they're a right fit for you. Also, remember, Lincoln does work over at Koru doing ketamine assisted therapy as well, so he can help you with that. Remember, everybody, we couldn't do this without you. Your support, your comments are huge in spreading the word with our podcast. You sharing our links when we share them are huge with getting the word out. We always, talk about this, but please, if there's somebody in your life that you feel like needs to hear this, if there's somebody you come across, share one of the episodes that hit with you. Pass on the message. Let them kind of hear the struggles, hear the triumphs, and hear how the people we've had here on the show have overcome their obstacles in life and just become amazing human beings. We've had so many good people on the show, and we will continue. So again, thank you for tuning in to Surviving Life's Pickles. We love all of you, and we hope you have a wonderful day.